Red hydraulic fluid sprayed across the cockpit glass like arterial blood. At 20,000 feet, the B-24 Liberator was no longer a flying machine. It was 30 tons of dead metal screaming toward the earth. The pilot, Captain John Miller, pulled back on the yoke with both hands. His muscles burned. The controls felt as if they were set in concrete. Beside him, the co-pilot was shouting something, but the roar of the number 3 engine tearing itself apart drowned him out. Miller looked at the pressure gauge. 0. No flaps, no landing gear, no brakes, and 500 miles of hostile sky between them and home. Most men would have bailed out right then. But Miller knew something the manuals didn't mention. 2 of his gunners in the back were bleeding out, unconscious. They couldn't jump. If he bailed, he killed them. Miller gritted his teeth, his boot slipping on the slick, oil-covered floor. He was going to land this coffin, or he was going to die trying. It was July 1944. The skies over Vienna were the most dangerous place on Earth for an American aviator. The German flak batteries around the oil refineries were legendary for their density and accuracy. Pilots called it the Valley of Death. On that Tuesday, the 15th Air Force sent hundreds of bombers into the teeth of that defense. Many didn't come back, but the story of Bomber 42, named the Ragged Irregular, would become legend not because of the bombs it dropped, but because of the impossible fight to bring it down. If you enjoy uncovering these lost stories of survival and grit, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We dig deep into the archives to bring these moments back to life. According to his diary found years later, Miller never felt like a hero. He wrote, "The sky wasn't blue that day. It was black with smoke. I felt small. I felt like a spectator at my own funeral. The cockpit smelled of high-octane fuel and sulfur. The wind howled through a jagged hole in the plexiglass on the co-pilot's side. Every vibration rattled Miller's teeth. The B-24, known as the Liberator, was notorious for being physically exhausting to fly even in perfect conditions. Without hydraulics, it was a wrestling match with a giant." Miller wiped the stinging hydraulic fluid from his eyes. He looked over at Lieutenant Reeves, his co-pilot. Reeves was pale, his eyes wide, staring at the dead instruments. "Pressure lines are gone, John." "I know. We can't extend the gear." "We will." The confidence in Miller's voice was a lie. He knew the manual release cable was a nightmare to operate even on the ground. In the air, while fighting a stall, it was suicide. Then the second blow came. A burst of flak had not only severed the hydraulic lines, but had shredded the control cables for the rudder. The plane lurched violently to the left. Miller slammed his right foot onto the rudder pedal, but it went straight to the floor. Nothing happened. The huge bomber began a slow, sickening spiral toward the Alps below. "Throttle back, number 4, Miller screamed. Reeves hesitated. "Do it! We have to steer with the engines." Reeves yanked the throttle back. The uneven thrust shuddered through the airframe, fighting the turn. The nose swung back, agonizingly slow. They were level again, but they were dropping fast. Miller wrote about this moment in a letter to his wife. "I thought about the garden back home, how quiet it was. It was the only thing that kept my hands from shaking. The crisis wasn't over. They were approaching the Adriatic Sea, and the emergency airstrip at Vis was their only hope. Vis was a short, jagged strip of dirt carved into an island. It was barely long enough for a fighter plane, let alone a crippled heavy bomber with no brakes. Miller turned to the flight engineer, Sergeant Kowalski. The man was covered in soot, standing behind the pilot's seat. "Kowalski, get to the catwalk. Crank the gear down by hand." "Sir, the catwalk is gone. Flak took it." "Then crawl on the beams. Just get those wheels down." Kowalski looked at the open bomb bay. Below them, the ocean was a gray blur through the open doors. One slip meant falling 10,000 feet without a chute. "I'm on it." Kowalski vanished into the dark, freezing fuselage. Miller fought the yoke, sweat freezing on his forehead. The island of Vis appeared on the horizon. It looked like a pebble in the water. They were coming in too hot. Without flaps to slow them down, the B-24 was a missile. "Airspeed 160, Reeves called out. "That's too fast, John." "I can't slow her down without stalling. We're going to run off the end of the strip." "Maybe?" They could see the runway now. It was a strip of brown dust surrounded by jagged rocks and ocean. Emergency flares popped red from the ground tower. They were signaling, "Do not land." Miller ignored them. He couldn't circle. He didn't have the fuel or the strength to pull the nose up again. He could feel the plane shuddering, on the verge of falling out of the sky. "Gear check," Miller yelled over his shoulder. Kowalski's voice came over the intercom, breathless. "Left main is down and locked. Right main is down. Nose gear. It's stuck, sir. It's dangling." Miller's stomach dropped. If the nose gear collapsed on touchdown, the cockpit would dig into the dirt. The nose would crush instantly. They would be decapitated by the earth. "Kick it down, Kowalski. I'm trying. Kick it until it locks or until your leg breaks." The runway rushed up to meet them. The details of the ground became sharp. Rocks. Grass. A parked jeep. Miller watched the airspeed indicator. 150 miles per hour. Way too fast. He cut the throttles. The engines sputtered and died, leaving only the sound of the wind screaming over the aluminum skin. He held the nose up, praying for the lock sound. Seconds felt like hours. The main wheels slammed into the dirt. Bang! The bomber bounced 10 feet into the air. "Hold it!" Reeves screamed. Miller wrestled the yoke forward, forcing the wheels back down. The brakes were useless pedals. The plane roared down the short strip, eating up the runway. Dust billowed inside the cockpit. The end of the runway was rushing toward them. Beyond it, a sheer drop into the sea. Miller held the nose wheel off the ground as long as he could. He needed the aerodynamic drag to slow them down. Speed dropped. The cliff edge was 500 yards away. Then 300. "Put it down, John." Miller let the nose drop. He braced for the crunch of collapsing metal. He waited for the cockpit to crush around his legs. Clunk. The nose gear held. Kowalski had done it. But they were still rolling at 60 miles per hour. The cliff was right there. Miller did the only thing left. "Locked left brake," he yelled, knowing there were no brakes, but signaling his intent. He jammed the throttles for the right side engines to full power. The engines roared to life, screaming in protest. The uneven thrust twisted the bomber violently to the left. The landing gear tires shrieked, tearing rubber against the stones. The massive wing dipped, the tip digging into the dirt. The B-24 spun like a chaotic top. Dirt, rocks, and metal flew everywhere. The world outside was a brown cyclone. Then, silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Dust settled in the cockpit. Miller looked out the side window. The right wing was hanging over the precipice. The ocean waves crashed on the rocks 200 feet below. They had stopped 10 feet from the edge. Miller slumped in his seat, his hands shaking so hard he couldn't unbuckle his harness. He whispered, "Thank you." That was all he could say. From the back of the plane, he heard groans. The gunners were alive. The medics were already running across the field toward the dust cloud. By nightfall, the crew was in the mess tent. They didn't speak much. They just ate and stared at the table. Miller wrote in his diary that night, "We cheated the devil today. I don't know why he let us go, but I'm not asking." According to the official U.S. Army Air Force report, The landing was deemed a feat of exceptional airmanship. The mechanic who inspected the plane later found that the nose gear had never actually locked. It was held in place by rust and friction. If they had hit a single large rock, it would have collapsed. Captain Miller flew 20 more missions before the war ended. He returned home to a quiet life as an accountant. He rarely spoke of the war. But every year on that date in July, he would sit alone on his porch and just watch the sky. If you want more forgotten stories of real people who lived through the B-24, subscribe. This channel exists to bring their voices back. War creates heroes out of necessity, but it leaves memories that never fade. This was one of them.